the screen. So we're very lucky to have Ted help us out tonight with our webinar, and he's going to be hosting most of the way from here. And then at the end, we're going to bring in Joe Gooden, the Vice President of Heart Zones. Say hi and tell us where you're coming from, Joe.
Hey, everybody. I'm from the deep south, from Atlanta, Georgia. So it's actually Buford, Georgia, but nobody knows where Buford, Georgia is. So Atlanta, Georgia, probably most people understand where that is. Good to see everybody today.
Very cool. Yeah, special, thank you to all the East Coasters. I know it's going to be getting pretty late here. I promise to kind of keep this a little bit short, kind of thinking an hour or less with questions and answers at the end. So if you have anything, we'll have plenty of time and we'll stay on as long as you need to answer those. And again, just a big thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know some of us have started school this week. I know some are kind of enjoying the last weeks of summer. So we really appreciate you showing up, and we hope to hear from you tonight. Ted, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, team. Thank you so much. And before we get going, I just want to thank all of you who are here live. I know you could have been anywhere else with this valuable time of yours. So really appreciate the fact that you're here with us and learning. Please contribute, and I will learn, or we will learn just as much from you, because the smartest person in the room is the room. So we'll get after this right now. So I'm just going to flip it over to this view here. I won't be able to see you guys, but you can see that well. Gateway to social emotional learning. Are we clear?
That looks great.
Awesome. Okay, team. So I just want to start off with a little land acknowledgement, just to let you know who I am, where I'm coming from, and the privilege I get to have right now. So my name is Ted Temertzoglou, first generation settler, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. My background is Greek descent. I'm a first generation, as I said a second ago, and my pronouns are he, him. I acknowledge that the land from which I'm presenting you on is traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas, the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and now is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 of the Mississaugas of the Credit. So once again, I am honored to be learning and growing with you. A little bit about me and us. I am the founder and president of Life is Athletic. What does Life Athletic do? We work with schools, school boards, countries, governments, whoever wants us to support student and staff health and physical literacy. Our combined experience, that's my lovely wife that's on the top part. She's there for obvious reasons because she's my better 3/4. And our combined years of experience is 64 years. And that draws from the work that we do with schools worldwide. Our services are rooted in social justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, social emotional learning. And of course, my background, my master's thesis is in teacher-student relationships, and Carolyn's all about teacher-student voice. So on that note, I've been lucky enough to offer workshops to help schools really embed quality physical education. Now, all of these slides here and all the links I'm going to be talking about, I am going to supply all of the links, and most of the slides. There's some I can't give you because of copyright reasons. I don't have all these people's permissions to have their faces out there. But that poster that you see in that picture is a literature review done by Unesco. And what it is what would happen is if the world ran quality physical education programs. And in that document there, that guideline for policymakers, it has those steps that schools would take to make sure that happens. So when you hit I'll give you the link and you'll be able to hit that and you can create your own poster if you like. I've been blessed in my life to be a part of some pretty amazing projects here in Canada that have spilt over globally. And one of them, the one on your right there, is a kinesiology resource. It's available digital and hard copy. It's for grade 12 students. So we're very lucky that we have a university designated course in high school for kids called kinesiology. It's a physical health education credit. So kids that are looking to get in any health related field, or personal trainers or doctors or what have you, would take that course and they would get credit for it when they apply to universities. And the one that you see on the left there is our grade 9 and 10 textbook. And both of those resources are approved by our government. We have to get those approved to get on in order for schools to be able to invest in them. I've also had the pleasure of working with a giant in the fitness industry, and his name is Dr. Stu McGill, and he is a movement expert. He's a biomechanist. If you follow him on Instagram or Twitter or have his certifications, What we decided to do years ago is have some evidence-based movement patterns for kids. I'm going to give you all of the links to those videos. So those are all up there for free, and you'll see the links at the end of this presentation. And again, we'll put that for you in a document as well. But now what's taken the majority of my life since COVID has hit is creating these online courses that school boards invest in. And they're also coaching courses, meaning that I also do calls with these teachers and these school boards. One of them, brand new, it's about to be released next week, is called The Wellness Architect. Another one is called Your Road to Vertical Alignment, which is a system-wide approach aligning K-12 outcomes, whether you're using SHAPE standards or any other province or country standards. And then the one that I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about today is a course called Green Exercise, the Gateway to Social Emotional Learning. And that's what I'm going to give you a snapshot into today. What are our learning goals? What are we going to get at it today? So by the end of our time together, we're going to take a look at how culturally responsive teaching ties in with social emotional learning. We'll also do the exact same thing for movement and the brain. We'll also do the exact same thing with something called green exercise in high intensity interval training and SEL. And then we're going to look at how are we going to do this school-wide, because it can't all fall on you and me. It can't fall just on the health and physical education teachers. It's just not enough time, and we're not going to put a big enough dent into helping these kids sustain the levels that we need them to get to. And then at the end, as was mentioned earlier, we'll talk about some funding opportunities, or Joe will specifically talk about some funding opportunities. So I want to start off by reading to you a quick poem by Beth Strano. I love this poem because for our students or for our staff, it lays the foundation for creating safe spaces. So it says, there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we've all caused wounds. This space seeks to turn down the volume on the world outside and amplify the voices that have to fight to be heard elsewhere. This space is not perfect, nor will it be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, not you, not I, not the group, but it will be our space together, and we will work on it side by side. And this is an authentic way of just telling kids or our staff that, you know, we're human, we're imperfectly perfect. And the personal thing is that we need to do is work together. Another concept that this is going to be rooted in, and one that I know some of you have heard, especially people who are really into the NBA and basketball, especially if you follow Doc Rivers and the 2008 Boston Celtics. Their whole reason they credit their NBA championship was because of the concept and the philosophy of Ubuntu, which is a South African term, and it basically means, according to Nelson Mandela, it's the profound sense that we are human only through the humanity of others, and that if we're going to accomplish anything in this world, it will in equal measure be due to the work and achievement of others. All of us as health and physical education teachers or parents or teachers in classrooms, we are here because the groundwork was laid to us by our four people, the people who came before us. Now our challenge is how are we going to leave it for them afterwards? COVID, or this pandemic, has really heightened some of these things that we need to be focusing on. And one of these things is called social emotional learning, right? So what's social emotional learning in the way my brain thinks of it? I've taken the Castle definition and kind of made it my own. So it's the know-how and how to learn to acquire, or what a dear friend of mine, Dr. Jamie Mandigo, calls, these skills are taught, they're not caught. And one of them is self-awareness, right? To understand and manage our feelings, one's own strengths and opportunities, self-management, how we manage our behaviors, our impulses, how we express our feelings and how we do that in respectful ways, social awareness, understanding empathy for others and having empathy for others. And then of course, relationship management. Relationships are hard work. How do we respect diversity for people who are extremely different than us or have different lenses than you and I? And then making responsible decisions. These things don't just happen. We have to learn things. And these things take a lot of work. We're not going to learn them or acquire them right off the bat. And myself personally, I know I work on these every single day and I screw up every single day. And that's okay. It's the fact that we're working towards that journey. When people ask, well, what's the connection to SEL and our curriculum? Well, if we just look at the US standards, your SHAPE standards, you can see that clearly standards 3, 4, and 5 have components that we just mentioned. So standard 3 about the physically literate individual demonstrates the knowledge and skills to achieve and maintain a healthy, enhancing level of physical activity and fitness. Well, that also spells off to, can you imagine if we all became fit enough where we would avoid most of these diseases that end our lives before the age of 65? What would the impact be on the healthcare system? So these are important things. Standard number 4, and you can read all of those there, and you'll certainly get this slide to go over as well. How do we get there? Well, we're reminded by Maya Angelou that kids don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. They're not going to remember everything we're trying to teach them, but they're going to remember how we made them feel. And especially at the high school level, where kids vote with their feet, they decide to choose our subjects, right? It's not mandatory that they have to take physical education in most states and in most provinces, or indeed in most places. So one of the things I'm really going to encourage you to dive deeper into, and you can find some of her teachings on YouTube, but also I really recommend you getting Zarita Hammond's book on culture responsive teaching and the brain. This is not the definitive work in what I'm going to explain to you now, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of snapshot. The other person that does a lot of research in this area is a lady out of the University of Manitoba here in Canada, in the province of Manitoba, the University of Manitoba. It's Joni Hallis. And they do a lot of work in these kind of environments. So one of the umbrellas is awareness. And what does that basically mean? It's understanding our lenses of bias and understanding our lenses of culture. And for teachers, depending on what environments we teach in, we have to embrace and learn what our clients are bringing us, the type of kids that we're getting. So looking as the teacher as the ally. Information process. There's a big movement called meaningful physical education, which is outlined in Kretschmer's model about fun, delight, personal relevance, making sure that our curriculums reflect those things. Community of learners, knowing that kids have support throughout the school, that at the end of the day, we don't teach subjects, we teach kids. And the last one is these learning partnerships. In other words, making our challenges developmentally appropriate for kids. All right, you're saying, Ted, probably that's all great and fine and dandy, but how do we get there? One of the things I've had a tremendous amount of success with, when the pandemic hit, I did a lot of demonstration rooms for grade 3s to grade 4, with teachers watching and me going in and helping them. The one biggest thing where kids really latched onto behavior, and this ties in tremendously with SEL, is when we teach kids a little bit about their brain. So we talk about these 3 major players in the brain. I got this idea from Dr. Karen Bax at the University of Western Ontario. Wow. And so when we look at things like the amygdala and the hippocampus, they're in our lower brain or our primitive brain. These are things that protect us, right? The amygdala is our alarm response, our flight, fight, freeze response. The hippocampus is what stores those experiences, right? So certain things that trigger us are stored in the hippocampus, right? Saber-tooth tiger coming towards you, not that it would today, but we know that that's fear, fear, fear. Red light turning while you're driving, you know you have to slow down. Those things are all stored. Well, there are things that we can do to help calm that. And Dr. Shanker, this guy who's a self-regulation specialist, talks about the red brain and the blue brain. So when we're in red brain, when everything is alarm, when everything is a threat, it doesn't matter what the teacher's trying to tell us. It doesn't matter what's trying to get in. We're in anxiety mode. We're in complete freeze or flight or fight mode. How do we get out of that? Well, you're going to see a little bit later on in this presentation some strategies on how the best way to get out of that is through movement. And it's not coming from me. It's going to be coming from some pretty powerful researchers that I think you know. And then there's this area about executive functioning, what makes our decisions, what makes our thinking and our rational thought processes. That's our prefrontal cortex, and it develops over time. Scientists tell us it doesn't happen until the age of 25. So another model that you may want to be thinking about, and what we taught these kids, is that there are circumstances in life, and this is Brooke Castellano's model. I think she was the maven of life coaching. And we know that in life, things happen, circumstances. Well, when something happens to us, we have thoughts about those things. And then those thoughts lead to feelings. And then the feelings lead to actions. And then those actions lead to results, right? So the only thing that's really happening in the world is our perceived reality of the world. So if we think of the brain like a computer, the actual components that I just mentioned are the hard drive, and then our self-talk and our perception is the software or the apps that it runs. And for many of our kids, depending on their backgrounds, we need to get to know this. So I love this quote about, it's attributed, we don't know to, but you see it a lot of Captain Jack Sparrow from the movie, forget it right now, but Pirates of the Caribbean. The problem's not the problem, really. The problem is how we see the problem, our attitude about the problem. A model I want to push you towards that is embedded and infused with social emotional learning, and I'm going to give you the link to their free webinar. It's called Teaching Personal and Social Responsibility from Don Hellison. And I'm just going to pop these up here, okay, and make some really quick connections for you. But as you can see, as you're reading through those, that's social emotional learning written all over it, right? And that sounds great. And these are great little things that we've been mentioning. But how do we get to that as quickly as we can? Like, what's one thing I can do tomorrow, the next day, that can get me to understand my kids better and understand where they're coming from? One of those things already been created for you, and Shape did it. I thought it was a marvelous thing. I'm going to give you this link. You're going to get these links, and it's just a survey that you would send home. You can change these questions up any way that you want, but surveys are a great way of getting to know our kids. Now, I'm going to stop there for a second, and if you don't mind, in the chat box, could you please put, if you like, what are some of the ways that you use to get to know your kids? Get to know where they're from, their backgrounds, their ideas, their wishes, their dreams, their mountains, things that they want to do. Where are you getting those from? And I'm just going to switch over here so I can hear some of this stuff. So pop that in there. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to a minute before we move on, just to see how you're connecting some of this stuff.
Yeah, and if anyone's feeling brave and wants to take that question or comment, live, feel free to hop on.
Glenn with icebreakers, absolutely. Yeah, Timothy, humor, 100%. Not taking ourselves to Google form, yeah. Coach Ogrea, thank you. Yeah, competitive challenges. Peter, great to see you, Peter. Welcome, first day questionings, yeah. Laughter, I think that's Saskatchewan SPIA. That's our physical health education body. I think that might be Reg Lido. Laughter, absolutely. Fantastic. Yeah, all of those. And I know that you have so many more. A couple more ideas, ones that have really circulated away, and kids can express this either way. Like, some kids may want to do the survey, some kids may not want to do the survey, some kids may want to send it to you in a slide deck. One of those things that I came across was what's in your virtual locker. So if kids were going to create a locker and you ask them about, well, what's your name? I use myself as the demonstration for these kids. Hey, this is my name. My pronouns are this. Now, I didn't do this with the grade 4s and grade 6s. I didn't tell them my pronouns. I just didn't think that was developmentally appropriate. But for the high school kids that I worked with, I did, right? Because there are those kids in the classroom who don't identify the same way that I identify. And it'd be nice for me to know that. A little bit about my background, as you said earlier, about a little bit about my personal life, who I am, my kids, I'm married, what I love to eat, my hobbies. I love to fish, love to travel, love to learn. My favorite movies are documentaries. The book I was reading at that time was Open, and I am absolutely hooked on TikTok dances. They are the best cardio workout I have had, and I'm making all kinds of new neural connections because I'm learning all those. Another way is a vision board. Kids may want to express it that way. You might have exit cards. You might have a bulletin board outside your gymnasium, all different ways that kids can give you information and us to learn more about them and their background. Because again, like Maya Angelou says, they don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. I want to share one that blew me away. This was work that we were doing just before the pandemic hit with the International School of Beijing. And we were doing a demonstration classroom, and this kid comes in the classroom, and this is his computer. This is the cover of his computer. And I said to him, I said, oh man, that's pretty sweet. What is that exactly? And he goes, well, this is my vision board. And I said, well, tell me more. Like, what is it? He goes, well, I just got cut. Last year I got cut from the soccer team at school. And this is how I'm going to get back on it. And this is what I'm going to do in 3 years. And this is what I'm going to do in 5 years. Right? So the kid had already planned that out. So let's throw that into the social emotional learning space when we talk about self-management, self-awareness, relationship building. Kids got all of that right down there, right on the cover of his display. It doesn't have to be daunting. Another way that I found, and again, this is not, to say this is the be all and end all, but to make a really good social emotional connection with our kids is asking the kids straight out day one or hitting the reset button tomorrow, right? Depending on how your classes are going, and say, hey guys, you know what? I just want to ask you guys a question. We've been together for a little while now. Let's just pause here for a sec. Let's hit the reset button. Let's throw some of this stuff into the trash and delete it for a bit and double click on this for a second. And the double click I want to do is, what do you need from me to make this learning environment, to make our gymnasium, to make our classroom safe, equitable, and productive for your learning? And again, you may want to change those words depending on your on the grade levels that you teach, right? Or in other words, what do you need from me to be the best version of yourself? And kids can brainstorm that any way that you want. Again, exit cards, surveys, anything that you want to do. But then I think the kicker is to say to the kids now, to our classrooms, okay, yeah, we can make that happen, but here's what I need from you to create those conditions in the classroom. And we can go back now maybe to Don Hellison's model and look at those agreement models, right? And one of them looks like this. This was come up by a class, right? When they went through all this and it was asked, like, what do you need to feel safe and included in this space? Because our athletes are going to flourish and thrive. We know that. But it's not only them that we're trying to teach. We're trying to get all those kids who can't stand movement to move. So you can read some of those things there, and you're going to get this slide anyway. So you'll be able to look at it further. 2 TED Talks that when I'm having a bad day, I turn to remind me of the power of a health and physical educator. To me, our curriculums, no matter where you are around the world in health and physical education, they stand to be the greatest healthcare intervention the world has ever seen, right? There's nothing more important than giving our kids their health and their well-being. So Rita Parson up there at the top. Again, these are linked. You're going to get these ones here. So you'll be able to just click on those links when you get the slide deck, and you'll be able to see those if you want to see those. What's our opportunity here? Again, with SEL. Like, how does SEL tie into what I'm about to tell you here? Okay, stay tuned. Research done way before the pandemic, but leading up to the pandemic. This is out of Ireland. About some 15-year-olds are less fit than their grandparents. How do I avoid this epidemic? Well, we're starting to see now kids that have acquired metabolic syndrome. What is metabolic syndrome? I'll pop them all up there. I like to call it excess stored energy. Scientists call it fat or excess fat or obesity or whatever they call it. Really, it's just unused energy. That's all that is, right? So if they have excess amount of that, not good. If they have increasing blood glucose levels, not good. Too much sugar in their blood, too much fat in their blood, not good. High blood pressure, not good. And if they have low levels of that high density lipoprotein, not good. If kids or adults have any 3 of those, then they have a clinical definition or clinical diagnosis of metabolic syndrome. We were really hard pressed to see this in kids 20, 30 years ago. But these are numbers out of the States, and you can read them yourselves if you like. So 10% of adolescents in the US have acquired MS, metabolic syndrome. To me, this is an opportunity. To me, this screams the reason of why we need health and physical educators in schools. 73% of them have at least one symptom. And we're starting to see 5% of these children, 2 to 10 years of age, have metabolic syndrome. And those are the studies. And again, I'm going to give you that slide so you can have. Just after Biden got elected, President Biden was elected, the CNN did a great special on COVID and asked these doctors, why are these people dying? And they're all saying that the majority of these people who have passed away to this stressor or to this condition, COVID, was because they all had a couple of those comorbidities, right? Like, we know when we have some of those things, it's harder for us to fight those things. I'm not saying that's the only reason. But Dr. Bricks, the lady in the middle there, did come out and say, if we just were in better physical condition, we wouldn't see those numbers as high as we would. So you can find that on the CNN streaming channel, and you can watch that whole thing if you want. Pandemic number 2, this is self-reported data out of Canada with kids. I'm going to show you this 24-hour movement guideline. Again, you'll get a copy of this. We know the recipe on what it means to be healthy. Like, we know the dose response, how long you need, what type we need. We have that information. We have that research. So before COVID hit, and Canada wasn't doing very well, and the US wasn't doing very well, and Europe a little bit better, Places like Poland, a lot better. But anyway, 15% of kids ages 5 to 17 years were meeting the 24-hour movement guidelines. That's not great. That's 85% who are not. During the COVID pandemic, that number went down to 4.8% in kids age 5 to 11 and 0.8% to kids age 12 to 17. 62% of the kids and teens were less physically active outdoors, which is going to be the crux of what we're going to be talking about here soon. And 79% of those kids and teens spent more time on their devices. So World Health Organization, yes, research globally out of, in 24 hours, what it should movement look like for kids ages 5 to 17, which is most of the kids you and I teach. It's 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day, aerobic, anaerobic, and as well as 3 times per week, push, pull, squat, carry, lunge, hinge pattern movements, resistance exercise. Doesn't have to be weight, it can be own body weight. If we're incorporating high intensity interval training, the time can be shorter. And I'll show you the research on that in a second. Several hours of unstructured play. We're looking at that many hours of sleep and no more than 2 hours of recreational screen time. That doesn't include school time. So research done by Dr. Fowles, Jonathan Fowles from the University of Acadia, works with Exercises Medicine International. They looked at all this and they said, well, what would happen if we adults did our movement guidelines? For you and me, it's only 150 minutes a week. So I'm just going to pop them all up there, right? I'm a little mindful of the time here. The number on your left is so not the bolded number, but the number that's just kind of written out there, unbolded, is if you did the 150 minutes. Those are the diseases that largely end our lives before they should, right? The bolded number is if you did more. Right? So there's studies that range that. So if you're looking at strokes, if you did the 150, you're looking at somewhere between 27 to 45% reduction. But I want to bring you down to 0.7, 8, and 9, because these are diseases now that are classified as movement diseases. And number 7 reduces the risk of Alzheimer's by 40%. They're starting to categorize that as a hypoactive activity, meaning that it's brought on because of lack of movement. Other reasons too, I'm not saying that's the only reason. But look at depression. Movement is as effective as Prozac or cognitive therapy, which are the 2 leading therapies for depression. And then you can see what it does to premature death and how much we stay away from the nursing homes in. So it really increases our life. If we did this green, what's green? Psychologists, sociologists have defined green exercise as any movement that occurs outside. So hiking, biking, some of the things that you see in this cartoon here, because we are animals, and the certain smells and certain things in the environment, the sunshine, we acquire energy from. We also make vitamin D from. We also build up our immune system, and too much to go into right now, but also our gut biome, right? We get all of that from being outside. So when you look at the meta-analysis research on green exercise, here's all the things that it did that made us better. So there is a big push of getting our kids outside. Richard Louv calls this nature deficit disorder, because our kids aren't spending enough time outside. So if we can get them outside, great. Connections to SCL. What's been the landmark research into that? How does exercise create conditions in the brain to help support SCL? According to the research done in the Spark book, but also in a couple of the books I'm going to show you here in a second, it turns out, according to Dr. John Rady, that moving our muscles produces proteins that travel through the bloodstream into the brain, where they play pivotal roles in the mechanisms of our highest thought processes. They clear our brains. They make us feel good. They reduce anxiety. They reduce depression. They build us for learning. Those things have been classified now by scientists as hope molecules, and they're called myokines. Myo, Greek word for muscle, kins for movement. The muscle now is what's thought to be more of an endocrine system. It secretes these things. It's no longer just this thing that you ask to move and it moves. It actually communicates with the brain, is what they're finding. And if we look at this logically, other than physical education and recess, really how much time are our kids spending out there moving, right? So I want to pause there for a second, come back over here and ask you this question. Based on what we've known here and where you are in your schools right now, how much time are you given to physical education in your environment? So if you can just tell us the grade that you teach, how much physical education they get or movement that they get, including recess, that would be amazing. Let's see what is out there. Again, it depends on where you're from, but if you can share some of those things, that would be great.
Movements. Okay.
Pop it in the chat box there if you don't mind. And while we're waiting for some of those, I can share some of the Canadian ones for some elementary schools where they need it the most. All right, there's Saskatchewan, 150 minutes per week, which is great. So in the province of Saskatchewan here in Canada, that's what they get as well at the elementary level. Unfortunately, in my province here in Ontario, there is no recommended number. It just says that they get physical education. We don't actually have a number, unfortunately, right? So Saskatchewan, 150 minutes. How about in some of those places in the United States? How long do you guys get at the elementary level? Is it 20? Is it 30? If you don't want to type it in, feel free to unmute yourself and slam it out. Tell us where you're at.
Absolutely. The more the merrier. How about you, Beth Kirkpatrick? Do you remember what numbers you were teaching at?
Steven says
That's
K
what
to
I get
4,
for calling
40
someone
minutes twice a week, 6-day rotation. Grades 5 to 8, 1 hour, 2 to 3 times in a 6-day rotation. Yeah, some of those numbers are a lot better than what we get at the elementary level.
48 minutes every other day.
48, Beth? Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Beth.
Right. So as you can see from just even those numbers, that's just not enough. Illinois K to 3 has PB 4 days a week. Yeah. And Timothy, if I'm not mistaken, also mandatory phys ed K to 12 in the state of Illinois. Yes. Yeah. And the only province where we have that, Timothy, is in Manitoba. So they've got physical education taught by a specialist K to 12. Okay. So excellent. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for sharing that. So I think what we're starting to see is that in the vast majority of places in our little environment, but I can tell you this globally as well, it's not enough. It can't be just in phys ed to get what I'm about to show you here. So the SEL connection to movement is actually these myokines that are released and these hormones that are released. So looking at the research, again, by neuroscientists like this Daniel Wolpart, who has come out and researched and said that the entire purpose of the human brain is to produce movement. Movement's the only way we interact with the world. So what happens when we move? We get our daily dose, and I'm going to call that dose squared. Our body has its way of making its own pharmacy. Like drugs that you would spend money on the street to get the same effect, we get through movement. Not little old me talking about, I'm going to show you where that research is coming from. But when we move, right, our bodies produce and make and send to the brain and flourish the brain dopamine. What does it do? Improves motivation, focus, and learning. Oxytocin. This is the hug drug, the social connection hormone that is released in the brain. When we do these things in community, like we did when we were hunters and gatherers, when you look at the blue zone research of the countries in the world where people live the longest, the number one thing they say to contribute to that is the social connection. Social connection in the hug drug is oxytocin. We get that when we move, when we do exercise. Serotonin, even though a large of that is made in the gut, it's released to the brain. What does it do? It improves mood and mental health. But here's the big one. Brand spanking new the last 20 or 15 to 20 year-ish. We know about endorphins. We know about that persistence high, or what's sometimes called the runner's high. But this new stuff, endocannabinoids, exactly says what it mimics. It mimics cannabis release. And there are an unbelievable amount of receptors. What does it do? It reduces pain, anxiety, and depression, okay? It mimics cannabis, right? So the right here in the middle here, that is our amygdala. That's our flight response. Triggers when we are threatened, whatever that threat may be. But it has receptors for endocannabinoids, meaning that when the body releases them when they move, this kind of tells the body or the brain to kind of chill. We're okay, we're under control, right? These are ways of improving that. Now, it's not the only way, but if you were to ask because we have asked Dr. John Rady, what's the one thing you can do that will really reset your brain? It's going to be that movement. And then the other thing is this other myokin called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And I know you guys have heard a lot about this, but that's the stuff that helps the brain grow more brain cells, specifically in the hippocampus area, which improves memory and learning. And of course, let's not forget that side effect of your brain will make more capillaries. And if it makes more capillaries, it can get more oxygen. If you can get more oxygen, you can get rid of more waste, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where is this all coming from? Brand new book. I highly recommend you watch her TED Talk. And it's from Stanford, Dr. Kelly McGonigal. She explores exercise, how it helps us find happiness, hope, connection, and courage. She says in her book, like addictive drug, exercise works on the reward centers of the brain without the damaging effects of drugs. Exercise over time teaches the brain to like it, want it, need it. And those of you who are engaged in a normal physical activity pattern, you know this, right? But a lot of our kids don't. So in this book, you'll get all the lit research that talks about all of those things there that you can pick up on. Okay? So, staff meetings. We want to get some staff buy-in. A great little activity you can do with staff. You don't need any equipment. You're just going to ask for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, whatever you want. And here's what we do with our staff. We say to them, okay, I'm going to put up some pictures here. We're going to mimic this movement. And you can do this sitting, you can do this standing. But what I want you to think about while you're doing the movement is, how does this movement make you feel? You can play music if you like, but literally they are doing battle ropes in their class, right? Or sorry, in the staff room. They're moving, they're moving, they're moving, they're moving, they're moving. You do that for 20 seconds or whatever way that you want to do it. And then you ask the question, what does it make you feel? Because according to Dr. McGonigal, when we do movement that requires power, our brains encode I am powerful, especially when we do that in community. Same thing happens when we're doing exercises that involve wheeling or any kind of movement at all that moves a lot of muscles at the same time. So again, you would do this, ask them how they feel, and then we would put something up there that's a little bit different than this aerobic activity. We would do something that requires balance or grace. So just moving in ways like a ballerina would or a ballet artist would, right? Or Tai Chi would. What the brain encodes there, according to McGonigal, is I am graceful. I move with grace. So these are all pathways that the brain is creating when we do movement. When we looked at the research that comes out of depression, people who are severely depressed, this is 15,000 people who reported on this, and we asked them, okay, you personally, what's most effective? So that's over there on your left-hand side for you personally. And then we looked at what is not we, I didn't do this. This is from Jonathan Fowles again. What's popular? Look at the top there. The top response from all of these people is when they move. So movement is critically important. What we're starting to find now, the term high intensity interval training, I know sparks some people, lights them up a little bit, but really what this is movement, burst of exercise for a certain period of time, and then there's a lower level of that intensity level. But there's the review. It was a lit review done by Mental Health in Youth. And yeah, I think you could read that for yourself, and how it improves cognitive functioning. Because there are certain exercises, according to this young man here, Dr. Martin Gabala and Dr. McGonigal that you saw earlier, certain aerobic exercises release certain hormones or certain proteins from the muscle. Anaerobic releases other ones. Both of those ones, as we saw in the earlier slides, affect our social and emotional behaviors. They ingrain our social and emotional learning. So you want to know more about that? I'm just going to give you this article here. It's a lit review done in the US about all of the schools that are using high intensity interval training in the physical education classes and what they find. There's one study that's missing in there that I really want you to pay attention to. It's Dr. Sasha Kettelhart from Germany. I connected with him when I was developing this green exercise course that I'm going to share with you in 1 second, because he does high intensity interval training research on grade 3s, and those are his findings. My dear friend who is in this webinar has something I have used. I learned it in his last presentation that he did. It's Glenn Young's 4-corner station SCL check-in. I love this. We use this, my wife and I use this in a workshop we just did with one of our school boards. And here's basically how it works. And Glenn can tell you more, because Glenn, if I screw this up, you can please unmute yourself and give him a little bit more background. But it's It's a 2 to 5 minute strategy, and it's based on the relationship that emotions drive behavior and readiness to learn, which we know that. We just learned that a little while ago, but we also know that. So when kids first come into class, Glenn just actually asks them, how you feeling today? Or they may have that displayed. And based on their kid's response, Glenn has predetermined in each one of those stations and those various areas in the gymnasium, a green area that has exercises that are developmentally appropriate for people who are in that area there, who are feeling like really excited and alert and really good about themselves. Yellow, that's got other exercises in there, blue, red, et cetera, et cetera. And they're all developmentally appropriate. The goal here is to get kids moving regardless. So if a kid's having a bad day, I still don't want them sitting down there. I want them doing something, but I want them doing it on their level. And what we did here too is include student voice and student choice. So Glenn, I'm going to stop there. Hope I didn't screw that up too much, but can you add on to that or been some of your experience there?
Hey, Ted. No, that was great. That's exactly the idea. It's just a short little touch in to find out where your kids are when they come into your class. So yeah, that's good.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I've sourced you and credit you there. And Sally, I'm not sure if Glenn's webinar can be seen again by people, but it's there. And I know when I listened to Beth's and her connection to the heart zone stuff, I think a lot of that resonates in there as well. And now, moving on. Another one that I'd like to do is called Tabata Cheerleader. So if Will and I were partners, I'm just going to put it all up here. Basically what this is in a gymnasium or in a classroom or in a staff meeting, Will and I partner up. We pick one exercise that can be just a simple squat for the staff or for the kids. And Will's going to perform that exercise for 20 minutes, and I'm going to be his best cheerleader. Way to go, Will. Great form. You got this, brother. You're on fire. You're doing this. It's amazing. Just pumping his tires, And then the music will stop. 20 seconds will come up, and now Will do the same for me. So you can imagine in the classroom of all of this excitement and yelling. So we call that Tabata Cheerleader. Love it.
I like it. That would help me.
Try it. I'm telling you guys, got to give that a try at a staff meeting or try that tomorrow. So here's one thing we need to do, right? Because we talked a little bit earlier about understanding when these hormones are released. And it may sound like this is a really hard thing to do with kids, but once kids understand the why, like why are we moving, why we're moving, and what's happening in my body. And now that I know, these major three things, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex and how they behave, I am now taking ownership and control of my emotions. And we can tell kids by doing this kind of stuff, right? By saying, okay, well, here's the breath sound check by this was my professor, so I love him dearly. But Dr. Bob Good invented the talk test and the breath sound check. And we can do this. But what we do know is that when it comes to school boards, data drives decisions. And where I see the heart zone stuff and how I use it and how it flourishes and thrives is with acquiring the data from these kids, right? So knowing where are they in their heart zones. So again, Joe, when he comes on, we'll tell you more about this stuff. But the way I like to use it is putting that research into practice. Again, finding out when those proteins and teaching those kids. Now that language may change depending on the grade levels I'm teaching. With my grade 12s, I have absolutely no problem about telling them about all these proteins and what's happening. And that would apply to whether the kid wants to own the playground or own the podium, right? It would apply for the kid who's a fit elite and a kid who is wants to, get a US scholarship, let's say. It allows for a lot of student voice and student choice and goal setting. So the self-awareness and self-management, decision-making about my own personal health are things that we can start getting into now when we have that data, right? And when we make that presentation to people, it's from a place of proof. So I'm just going to show you one way we use this. I'm just going to turn down the volume here. So this is a grade 10 class, and these kids have decided to make their own little micro stations. They all have got their chips on, their heart zone heart monitors on. It's there's no names presented here. You're going to see it in a second. It's a physical literacy circuit they made, so there's going to be some sending and receiving over here in the corner, some power agility stuff that I know Glenn will find extremely familiar, and other of you on this session. But here was the gold for this administration. It's when I could show them, okay, well, here's where the kids are. And then when the session ends, and again, Will can tell you more about, how to collect this data. I'm just learning how to use all this great stuff. I can now go back to the principal. I can go to the director of education and say, here's what's happening, right? So we know what's happening with these kids and the release of these chemicals and why they're feeling it. And we can do different things as well that are there. So last thing I want to share with you before I move it on here, as I promised you, this is a hyperlink slide. You're going to get this slide. These are the charts that we made with Dr. Stu McGill, but these are all the videos. There's 40 in each chart. We lined them up with the long-term athlete development model, meaning that active start is K to grade 3. We're hoping that by the end of grade 3, kids acquire these movement patterns. They're all based around push, pull, squat, lunge, hinge, but with some fundamental movement skills. Anyway, you can hit through them and go through them and see which ones you like, and you can create your own little Tabatas. The good thing about them is they were reviewed by Dr. Stu McGill, so you know that the movement patterns are good, and kids learn through mimicry and repetition. So having really good resources is really important for kids. So that is the high school, the elementary one. There's also a high school version. It's got body weights and then any machines that you're using, not machines, but equipment that you're using. And then lastly, I want to share with you a little bit of research that was done in the States about what's the missing piece for teachers. Where are they seeing sort of the drawbacks of getting this kind of information into schools? We know that 93% of those teachers want more SEL focus, whether that's phys ed teachers or teachers in general. But again, as I'm saying, this is just my opinion. What I'm thinking, what I'm seeing here is that the more of us, the more teachers that we can have a little bit more movement in classrooms is also very supportive to kids, not just in physical education, right? So we don't just speak English in English class. We actually do that throughout the whole school. So training is lacking in most schools. This is just what the study has found by teachers. 55% receive some, others want more. And here were some of the barriers. The biggest one there is teachers' comfort level and feeling like, well, what do I know? And even though I shared with this is all about students, it's also about our teachers' social emotional needs too, right? And I know if we can get them moving more, that this stuff will come if we can get them to buy in. So one of the things that I've done, or we've done, Carol and I and the other people, some of the people here on this talk, is I created a 3-hour course. I'm proud to say now we've got 900 teachers going through this between last year and the end of this school year. And what is it? Just give you a quick breakdown. You'll get this link so you can look into it deeper. It's a self-paced course. It's geared specifically for SEL beyond PE. It's for grade 4 to 8 classroom teachers, not just PE teachers. So if you're a PE teacher watching this or watching it on a review, please share it with your community. Maybe this is a way that we can work together. There is a certificate of completion, and then there's the option as well of having coaching calls after it's done. You get 30 of these resources. So yes, you get a little bit of this information, but they get pre-made resources that they can use the next day in their classrooms. And again, I'll let you dive through that any which way that you want. Last little plug I'm going to make is some dear friends out of Alberta. Ikigai is a concept, Japanese concept about when your passion and your purpose meets your mission and vision. And they've developed these little manuals specific for each school on wellness. It's a wellness planner. And if you want more information, I'll give you her information. Now I'm going to turn it over to Joe. Sorry, Joe, I'm a little bit over there, 10 minutes. But Joe can fill you in on opportunities on how to invest in some of this stuff or in other things that you see out there. And please, if there are other things that you see out there, please share them in the chat box so others can enjoy what those are as well.
Thanks, Ted. I think you may have to give up your sharing ability and so I can share my screen. Thanks, Ted. Great information. We always get the question, so how do I fund my SEL programs, or how do I get funds to buy hard songs? So let me share my screen real quick. I apologize. I'll take a second to flip over.
That's great, Joe. We can see it.
Nope, it's the wrong one. I've kind of changed gears based on what Ted has covered. And let's see, 1 second.
Yeah, while Joe's looking for that team, like that's where I see like the biggest connection here is when we can get kids understanding, yeah, my heart's working. Yes, I am in this zone, but really what's happening to my brain? That's, I think, for me anyway, personally, we're getting a lot of buy-in doing that.
Yeah.
So we see a slide saying funding opportunities.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not letting me click on it. Let's see. Oh, shoot.
While Joe is looking at that team, if you got any questions, I know I didn't think I was going to come out sounding like a machine gun, but I think I did. Please just put it in the chat box.
Well, I apologize. My brand new computer is frozen up and not letting me share the presentation.
Yes, I'll be sticking around for more questions. Absolutely.
Hey, Ted, Timothy McCaslin was asking if one of your posters is available. I believe it was the How Hard and How You Feeling poster.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. Yeah, I'm going to make that available for you as well. Yeah, that's Dr. Robert Good, Bob Good's research on the breath sound check talk test. Absolutely. And Timothy, when you speak of me, please speak highly, okay? Thanks.
Well, it doesn't look like it's going to allow me to share my screen here, but I kind of cover, I can see my presentation, but it's not. So funding is always the number one question. How do you get funding to, for your SEL programs or for Heart Zones Move system? School district funding, school and district funding, is the main way. PTOs and PTAs is the main way as well. Beth Kirkpatrick, which is on the call as well and works for Heart Zones, I refer to her as the queen of funding. Okay, she grew up as she was a small PE teacher in Iowa, and Beth, I mean, you can kind of jump in of how you got funding, and because I know you got close to $1 million of funding for a small school that you're in. So one of the things that Beth has, we have on our website is a guide to funding, and Beth has a webinar that basically tells how she went about getting her funding. So after the call, one of the things we'll do, we'll share my PowerPoint. I apologize for it not popping up. I don't know what the issue is here. But Beth, we have a page called Funding. There's a number of webinars there on funding in Beth's webinar. And actually, she has a PowerPoint that actually walks you through the steps of what she did to get funding. She's basically created a PowerPoint that you can take to your administration and present, and she's also given you like a template that you can fill out with the information to get the funding. Right now, one of the largest funding opportunities available, I think most of us probably remember the old PEP grants and the millions of dollars that were available through federal funding. Well, right now there's something called the CARES Act, and that's the COVID Relief Act. There's basically about $180 billion available out there for as far as funding. And one of the areas that's specifically mentioned in the CARES Act is the purchase of technology. So Heart Zones, our Heart Zone Solutions, Heart Zones Move is covered. We've had a number of districts that have purchased using CARES Act money. And if I could share my screen, I actually have a slide that shows you there's a government website that you can go to that lists the amount of funding that's available. You can actually see the entire United States, and it shows basically out of the $187 billion of funding, only about 30% of it has been spent. So there's money out there. We always hear, you tell me to go to our administration, you tell us to go to our PE coordinators or to our principals, and they always come back and say that there's the funding is just not there. It's already been spent. There's actually a website you can go to and you can see how much money is available. You can click down to the state. One of the examples I had was North Carolina. They got $1.4 billion worth of funding, and they've only spent 30% of that. You can actually then click on North Carolina. You can actually drill down to your school district and actually see how much money your school district received. It doesn't tell you how much they spent, but it actually gives you a number, so you can kind of use that frame of reference of 30 or 40% has only been spent. So there's money out there. Beth, you want to jump in here and talk about, it's really asking. You have to ask to be able to get you have to be persistent. And that was the one thing. That's the big thing that Beth was persistent about. And she'll kind of tell you a story about the funding that she received, through grant opportunities, really. And so
well, the whole thing is that I think Joe and I think most PE teachers have no idea how to write a grant. And you're not going to get anything unless you know how to state the problem. What is the solution? What are the specifics of the product you're trying to get the school to buy or the grant to buy? And when I found out after presenting, and you don't care if you get yes or no at the time, you move on. Right now, you could use this grant that's on our website, and it's done in PowerPoint form, so that you would make the presentation to the board of the hospital association or John Deere Corporation or whatever corporation or there's grant money, $92 billion in grant money available. The PE people don't go after anything. And it could be the school technology fund. They don't know how to make a presentation. Now, in their defense, if you've never had the technology, how could you make the presentation to get the technology that you've never had? You don't know what all the things you can do. And of course, I've been using the heart rate technology for 45 years. And so I finally thought, well, why don't I help them out? And so this PowerPoint that Joe has there, you would see that you could go through this. And what I tell the teacher is you have to be able to sell your program, to sell yourself. So when you make the presentation, make copies of the PowerPoint that we have here and lay it in front of each person up in the board, make the presentation. And the very first thing you say to them is, how about you guess what my heart rate is? So all 7 or 8 members of the board will guess what your heart is. Well, you're wearing a Heart Zones armband and you don't turn it on yet. And you let them guess. Well, they'll say, 100 beats per minute. I think she's. Next person will say 80 beats per minute. And they'll all have a different number. And then you'll say, now this is my problem. I have 65 kids every 48 minutes. Do you really want me guessing on how hard everybody is exercising? And don't you want the results each day of what they did? So when I got the technology, the heart rate monitors, heart rate sensors, I'm trying to think what year it was, 1980. It was a breakthrough that now I wasn't guessing, and nobody believes that guessing is a good way to assess. So no matter what activities you're showing or what great curriculum you have, unless you have the results day by day, kid by kid. Right now we're giving exercise prescriptions to groups of people, and we should be giving exercise prescriptions to individuals in a group setting. And we cannot do that unless we have a Heart Zones technology. You can't do it. So you have to make the presentation. But once you have this PowerPoint, now we've given you, everything. All you have to do is go find these places to present. And, it is your responsibility to go out and get this for your program. Otherwise, your budget is $200, $300 a year. If you think you can teach well with $300 a year or $500 a year, that's why physical educators continue to be at the bottom. They don't even go after the tech money that is in their school district. They don't even think it applies to them. And sometimes I worry that colleges still are not equipping people with heart rate technology coming out of college. We're doing a cardio test, the PACER test or the 20-meter run, which is supposed to be a maximal test, which is idiotic because you don't know if anybody's maximal. And we shouldn't be taking kids to a max anyway for a test. We have no medical background on any kid really. And so to do the test, we ask kids to keep going until they can't go any harder. And how absurd it is to let a kid drop out when he feels like it. And we give him a number like 50 laps. And in the spring, he's supposed to repeat that same performance and guess when to drop out. And if he drops out at 140 beats per minute in the fall, and he drops out at 180 beats per minute in the spring, the test is invalid. So we're doing things without technology, and I really do fault a lot of universities for not. I think every physical education major, exercise science major, every coach in a college should be required to own a heart rate sensor right off the bat, first year. Anyway.
Thanks, Beth, for jumping in there. Yeah, I actually got my PowerPoint to come up. So just like I said, I'll give everybody that we'll send a copy out with my presentation and Ted's presentation. So a couple of the links here. But one of the things I wanted to show you real quick is this is the United States, and this is the funding. I talked about the $189 billion that's out there. You can see the scale here across. It's 100% is in the dark blue. So you can look at your state, find your state, and if it's a light blue, you can kind of figure out the percentages. So there's no dark blue state other than Iowa, it looks like, that's used all their money. So the money's out there. Like Beth said, it's up to you to go out and find it, and you got to be persistent. Kind of the steps. It's find out the right people. Is talk to your principals, your coordinators, your procurement office, your tech committees. Gather your list of needs, and that's Beth has put all this together on the funding presentation on our website. And it's just ask. Beth is giving you the form to fill out. We can give you quotes, and it's if you don't succeed, try again. It's if you give it the first time, you'll never succeed. So I apologize for my presentation not working there. So I'll stop and it's 8 o'clock right now. Yes, sir.
Just one thing I wanted to add to what Beth was saying as well, and just tweak my mind right now. I think another great opportunity is sort of working with our team, our staff. And I've seen Beth's presentation on how to acquire it. It's like a no-brainer. Like you give that to teachers, fill it in. But I'm just thinking what a great assignment as well, or a call to help with the athletic association, the kids, helping them, they can help us put that stuff together. You see, then it might become even more meaningful of why we're doing what we're doing. So getting the English kids, getting different classes involved, that would be the first thing I would do, is throw this to the athletic association, say, hey guys, here's what's going on in the world. How do we want to be socially responsible? What's our cause? What do we want to do? Here's an opportunity. We've got $180 billion. Here's where our state is. Here's the application form. Let's figure out how to populate this puppy and get it out to the people who make these decisions and get this stuff for our school, parent councils. It doesn't all have to fall back, I don't think, on the health and phys ed teacher. But that's just me, Beth. You know your environment better than I know it. It's just
I agree, Ted, and I think that's the beauty of this is that you can use the heart zone sensors back to back classes, and then after school, whether it's basketball or whether it's any cross country, I can't imagine why we aren't using it there, and track, any athletic after school, they can use the same equipment they were using during the day with their physical educators, physical PE classes, and then we simply recharge it at night and then go back again. It should be used, before school, after school, and during athletics. Absolutely.
Yes, I guess we probably should wrap it up since we don't want to. We try to keep it to an hour. It's great. Great presentation, Ted. A lot of great information there. Like I said, I apologize for the funding mishap, but as it is on our website. There is a lot of great information there, and it's really going out and finding it and getting it. So Will, if you want to kind of wrap it up, or do we have any questions? I guess you want to.
Yeah, let me ask if anyone has any questions while we're still on here. Ted, I can't thank you enough. That was an incredible amount of info coming at us. Very impressive.
Maybe too much.
I think the only thing we were missing was some examples of your TikTok dance obsession. So maybe next time we'll start with that. Yeah. Okay. Well, here we go. Nope. If anyone has a question, feel free to email me or Ted. Ted is very quick at answering emails, which I appreciate. And we are going to send out this whole presentation as well as a recording to everyone so they can use it in their own practice and hopefully, use it to obtain funding as well. We really appreciate you all staying on so late, especially out there in the Eastern time zone. And we hope to see you again. We're going to do some more of these webinars, hopefully each month, right here at Heart Zones. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, team. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, Ted.
Thanks, Will. Great job.
Thanks, everyone.